And also I wasn't learning anything from being inside this big giant company who was like so afraid of the change that they weren't part of the change. So I was like, fuck both of these things.
Hey, welcome to Lumos Talks, the weekly show on growth marketing powered by Blindspot. Straight from the people doing the work on the ground. I'm Seb Weber, I'm the ECD of Blindspot, and this is my co-host, Bogdan. Say hi, Bogdan.
Hi.
Yeah, Bogdan's the CEO, so this is the first time he's joined us, which is, why don't you give an opportunity, Bogdan, to give us a 30-second rundown on what Blindspot is and what it does?
Okay, cool. So Blindspot is the tech that gets you on a billboard everywhere in the world, basically. To put it very simply. But the way it works is the whole thing started because we couldn't get on a billboard. We built a platform, connected all the screens, and now you can book all the screens by the hour, which is pretty awesome for major brands when they want to optimize their spend and not spend on dead hours. That's the elevator pitch.
Great. Well, I'm really happy to have our guest on this week, my good friend Ryan. Ryan has a really great, relevant perspective right now. He sits at the corner of culture and commerce, and he, as you'll hear, he directs tech and creative companies on how to speak to culture. So, Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, why don't you give us the rundown of what you've done and what you do?
My background, started as a kid, really I grew up in the streets of LA. I was a skateboarder, I was a musician and an actor and as a young guy. And I always had this like entrepreneurial bug. As a kid, I was starting little businesses around the neighborhood, paper routes and car washes and lawn mowing and just figuring out different ways of like building business. Not because I even like making money. I just like building things that, just I don't know, just figured it was fun. And I kind of decided early in my life that I wasn't going to go the path of like, you know, college degree and then go work for some company and be like a company man for the rest of my life. I kind of figured I wanted to be a rebel and a cowboy. So that was, and have the freedom to kind of do all the creative stuff that I like to do. So I kind of made that decision early on. And then, I started in the music business because I was in a struggling band trying to make it. And it was at a time where, we were still sort of sitting on the street corner, passing out CDs and promoting shows around Hollywood. And so I figured I'd start a marketing company to help other bands promote their shows and market their music. And so I kind of tried to figure out how to build a street team. Um, and the internet came online, and I started to use the internet to do street team stuff. So it was like street team marketing to promote bands and route tours and like do that kind of thing. And then I got my first and only job at Clear Channel's huge music companies. I thought I made it. And then when I got inside there, I was kind of this kid. I was like 18, 19 years old. And I realized I didn't fit in at all because I had these big ideas and I saw things changing, and the people that worked in the industry didn't want things to change. In fact, they were fighting really hard to stop, technology and innovation from taking over. Digital music was a thing. The internet was buzzing. And everyone that I saw at the high level of those big corporate companies were freaking out. And I'm like, this is definitely not for me. But once I was inside, I had now a business card with my name on it with a big company, so I can use that to do my marketing stuff. So I had a side hustle, and I was still promoting bands and marketing bands and using the internet to do that. But I was kind of cheating because I had this like, I could call and say I'm Ryan from Clear Channel, and people would pick up my call now. Um, Even though I was like basically a glorified intern, as like a lackey in the corner. I was there for maybe 2 years, and I learned enough inside that industry to know that. I guess also at the same time I went to school, I went to university for music business, and I realized two things. One is I'm not learning shit inside the university from a bunch of teachers who are not in the industry telling me about the industry. And I was like in it. And I was like sleeping on couches, promoting bands and like getting like no money, sometimes losing money on shows. Like I was like in it. Right. And also I wasn't learning anything from being inside this big giant company who was like so afraid of the change that they weren't part of the change. So I was like, fuck both of these things. And I left school and I left the business to go start my own company. And I was lucky enough to partner with a young DJ. His name was DJ Ski. And at the time, Ski was really known in a lot of different circles. He was on the radio as a radio DJ, and he was the mixtape guy. So he would get all the music out in the digital way. And he also like was into gaming and video games and knew also like sneaker culture and like knew a bunch of athletes. So there's always like this activity around him. And as a DJ, he was like a curator and a tastemaker. And he had this really big idea for music was eventually going to be free and the brands were going to pay for it. So like, and the brands were struggling to figure out how to get in front of cool kids. And so we basically built a company around that. And we did that for about 10 years, but we started like really slowly, but it happened really fast. We built recording studios. We had people recording music all day, and then they would take the music they recorded downstairs, give it to Ski. He'd play it on the radio, and then put out things on the internet. And then we'd shoot music videos in the back parking lot.
Interestingly enough, I just thought of this now, and this is not like it's like a very obvious tie back. But what I remember about Ski was you were the first DJs I ever saw have billboards. And I'm not joking. I'm not just bringing that up just because we're a billboard company, but you really were. I remember the Sunset and the Highland like intersection. You really were the first DJ in like 08, 09. And I remember seeing your fucking Ski TV billboards everywhere.
We did. So we had this idea that like it was like put your content anywhere the people's eyes are. And so we had, you're right, we had this studio on Cahuenga and Franklin. And it was this big giant, like big white building. And we used that building as a billboard essentially to start. And we started bringing our artist friends to create murals and different cool things. And we would take over the building. And even across the street, there was like this like crack apartment building across the street. And we bought this giant projector and we somehow snuck into the building and got the projector on top of the roof of the building across the street. And we projected our show onto our building from across the street. So we turned our building into a giant television set that was like pushing out like our content. But it was right off the freeway of Cahuenga and Franklin. And the billboard on top of us, we asked, I think it was also a Clear Channel billboard. And we asked like, what is the foot traffic? What is the thing? And they told us the number. They gave us all the numbers because we pretended like we were going to advertise on the billboard. So we had all those numbers and we just applied it to our building. We're like, and we started basically getting sponsored. We got Xbox and a couple other sponsors, Activision, to pay us to use that as a billboard. And so we kind of realized like, again, it's like, be where the eyes are. And we then the next thing that we did that I thought was kind of smart, but also we just didn't know any better. We had this woman who thought we were really cool. And I didn't really understand what she did, but what now in hindsight, she did out of home screens. So she had a network of syndication that was in every fast food restaurant, every, like, and in Denny's, Taco Bell, McDonald's and Carl's Jr., they were putting flat screens in those dining areas. And they were basically just running it with like the weather report and like maybe some news feed. And so she took all of our videos and basically syndicated it in all these fast food restaurants. And then eventually they syndicated it in college campuses and airport terminals. And now you see them everywhere. But like we were the first to kind of give them all of our music videos and behind the scenes and all the things that we were doing. And then every week she would give us an affidavit that said, look, you had, 100 million eyeballs and like this. And so we'd like, oh, this is sick. And people would like tweet like, yo, I'm at Denny's after the concert, or like I'm at Denny's after the rave eating a Moons in Miami watching Ski TV at Denny's. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. And so we would take those tweets and we'd put that as part of our like sort of marketing. And then we'd go back to the brands and be like, look at our footprint. It's like everywhere, right? Like Ski TV is everywhere. Mm. We had like a big YouTube presence, and then we had a big radio presence, and then we had the streets, and then we also had these like screens everywhere and like billboards and all the stuff that we just, and I had a friend that was selling billboards at Clear Channel and at Vista. And I'd call him and I'd be like, yo, I just want the empty inventory. Like, give me whatever you're not selling currently. And we would take it over, and I'd have graffiti artists come and do like crazy things on the thing. And like, we would just take over these billboards. Kind of unofficially. So the game for that was just like be everywhere, be like publish everywhere eventually. That was like the idea. And because we had that footprint, we had all the rappers that wanted to like not wait for the label to put their music out. They would go to Ski because he can get it on the radio right away. He can get it in the clubs, and he can get your shit everywhere. And so they would come to, and it was just so funny. It was so early days. But like a rapper like The Game was like a gangster rapper would be like, yo, Ski, I want to do a mixtape. And the label's giving me 10 grand and I'll give you 10, but you got to give me 5 back. And we're like, what? Like, and he's like, so like it would be this hustle. And so we would basically have like $5,000 to go shoot a music video, shoot some videos, and then put it everywhere and then give him back $5,000 to do. And it was like the craziest thing. So we kind of also revolutionized like not having any permits, not doing anything official. And eventually the head of Jimmy Iovine eventually called us, who's the president or, founder of Interscope. And he calls us for a meeting and we're like, oh, fuck yeah, we finally got the meeting with Jimmy. And and we're waiting around in the lobby for like an hour. And he finally comes, takes us in the meeting. And he's like, who the fuck are you? And who told you you can do a video for my artist? And we're like, and he's like, well, the funny thing is you got more views on that than I did for my video that I actually paid a lot of money for. And he's like, so can you do it again? And we're like, yeah. And he's like, great. Next time, put these headphones in it. And so he gave us the Beats headphones before they were actually like even out. And so if you look at the early videos we did, all of the videos had Beats headphones in them, and they were the first unofficial Beats. And so eventually we asked him for a retainer. We're like, we should ask him for a retainer. So he gave us a retainer to put the headphones in every video we did. And so it was our official like branded retainer to do branded content. That's how we got in that game. So that was kind of like early days. But then what that turned into was like also a giant incubator of what I call the incubator of bad ideas. So like every athlete, would be in the studio trying to make music. So you'd have like ball players like on game day coming in and smoking joints and hanging out with rappers and like this whole thing. And then every once in a while, a rapper like Snoop or a rapper like Game or a ball player like, Kevin Durant would be like, yo, I got an idea. I want to build my own headphone company. Or like, I want to do my own record label, or I want to start a clothing line. And we'd be like, yeah, we can help you with that. And so we kind of like incubated these bad ideas. And we would just basically say yes to anything. And then my job was trying to figure out how to build the business. So I'd take like this really stupid idea and I'd build a deck, and then I'd go find money for it. And usually the money came from like dudes that own cannabis shops that just needed to bring us a bag of cash, or like a rich uncle who wanted to put his daughter in a video or something. And so we would like start like, but then, it got more sophisticated over time, and we started to kind of incubate ideas and businesses. And then, I did that for about, I don't know, 9 years with Ski. We ended up launching a TV show with Mark Cuban. And then we just used the TV show as another way to market the things that we were doing. Um, and then I started my next company shortly after that, around 2015. I started a company called Language, and we built like a venture studio for celebrities like Tyler the Creator and Wilmer Valderrama and Scarlett Johansson and a bunch of like big celebrities that wanted to build their own business and not just be the face of another brand. They wanted to actually build something from the ground up. And it was a similar idea. Instead of bad ideas, they're at this point I learned how to say no to bad ideas and only say yes to the good ideas. But we built a model where an influencer would come to us with a really big disruptive idea, and we would help them shape it and build the brand, and then understand what the product is, and then go find supply chain for that product and like build the business, and then go find money. And instead of like drug dealers and rich uncles, we started looking for like institutional capital and real investors.
And then you worked with NASA and Space Force?
So somewhere in Language, we started getting a lot of really like high list like billionaires like Lorene Jobs and the Walton kids and Bezos's brother, and these billionaires that wanted to build a brand around their foundation, around their nonprofit. And a lot of these billionaires have nonprofits that are kind of putting their name and their money behind like solving some pretty big problems in the world, whether it's like healing the oceans or literacy or curing cancer or whatever that could be. And we got introduced to a lot of that like sort of like bleeding edge technology and bleeding edge sort of science behind those problems. And so I worked with X Prize, which is a big organization. It's been around for 20 years, but they launched giant prizes like to solve big problems. The first one that they launched was the Space Prize. So it helped create SpaceX and Virgin Galactic, and it was like the sort of launching of the space industry versus the space government backed NASA, right? And so working with X Prize, I got really deep into tech and into these tech entrepreneurs and tech scientists, and a lot of also very high level investors. And so that opened a bunch of doors for me. And I started to consult a lot of billionaires and their foundations and build like brands around their foundations. And then because I was at X Prize, I got an opportunity to work at Virgin Galactic. And so I was at another space company. I was, kind of the chief instigator. I would just kind of throw Molotov cocktails at the marketing department and be like, dude, you guys don't know what you're talking about. And I'd help them understand culture and sort of building bridges. So I, brought them people like the clothing company Stone Island to build their spacesuits, or like building cool things around like culture and integrating that into space and building space culture. And then the next thing when I had, when you work with Snoop Dogg and then you work with like Beats by Dre and then you work with Virgin Galactic, you get called like weird calls. So I got called by the Space Force. And the Space Force is like our military for space. And they needed a culture guy to kind of come in and understand storytelling and how to tell the story of space and where we're going, and how the government can invest in bleeding edge technology and bring in like like culture and entertainment. So I became the Minister of Culture for the Space Force Innovation Fund, which is like a great title. Got me my girlfriend, and it was awesome. I met my girlfriend the day I got the job at an art gallery. I was at an art gallery and I saw this little cute Lebanese girl and I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And she's like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I'm the Minister of Culture for Space." And she's like, "What?" I was like, "Done." I'm like, "Boom." I'm like, "This is going to come in handy. This is going to come in handy." So yeah, so I did that, and that just got me even deeper into understanding how to navigate like the Pentagon and how to navigate sort of military people that were interested in technology, but none of them know how to tell good stories. They don't know how to connect and market and brand themselves, and like they don't know how
Yeah.
that story can travel into the world. So I helped them kind of devise that.
How do you tell admirals and generals how to tell stories?
Well, yo, it's funny, dude. I have a whole thing. So
You
one,
should.
here's a crazy thing is like with marketing and storytelling, right? So I think marketing is separate from sort of storytelling and separate from branding. Like those three things are kind of go together, but they're all separate, right? So like when I think of like branding, it's understanding your identity. It's not just logos and like color schemes. It's like actually knowing the truest essence of yourself, right? And like it's a deep understanding of that. And it's also knowing who you're not, right? That's like a big part of understanding how to build a brand system. And a lot of companies skip that. They just like, "Oh, I need a website. Why don't I pay you to build my website and tell me what color the font should be in?" And it's like, that's not branding. That's a byproduct of branding. But like, so when I walk people through branding, I actually go through a deep exercise of like exploring and excavating who you are, what your story is, like all the limiting beliefs, all your exposing all these like really hard things to identify about yourself and what to say no to. And then we start building a whole brand architecture around it. So then it also is like fonts and typography, but that's branding, right? When it comes to marketing, once you know who you are, then the marketing is a system of tactical things that you need to do to get the world to see it, right? So like all the things that I did at Ski TV or all the things that you guys do with billboards, it's like that's one aspect of marketing. Like you need to like have visibility and you need to be, tell the world about what you do, but you need to give people a reason to join what you do as a belonging, right? People want to belong. They want to buy what they feel like they belong to. And so you got to give them a bunch of ways of seeing that. So one is when they're driving to work, they see the billboard, they pass by Ski TV or whatever, they pass by the thing, they hear it on the radio. You're seeing it constantly in different ways as part of the marketing structure, right? But the storytelling is really interesting. So what you said, Seb, is an interesting question. So with military, when I'm pitching, an investor or when I'm pitching a brand like Nike, I always start with the why, right? We're taught as creatives to start with why. Why we're doing this thing is because, whatever. You tell this story about why. And then you tell them who we're doing it with and like how this group of people is going to help build this why. And then you tell them like, again, remind them of what we're doing very tactically and then how, right? And so it's like why, who, what, and how is kind of the cycle, right? So I found that with doing that with military people, it's exactly the opposite. So I was like really beating my head against the wall because military, so because creatives, we care about the why, we care about the story, we want to be part of the mythology, and we care about the who. Who are we working with? Who am I associated with? Where's my name going to be connected to, right?
Mhm.
Military don't give a shit about that. They only care about the what and the how. Like anything is like anything other than like, are you competent to do this? And how are we going to get this done? That's all they care about, right? So I learned this the hard way because I was pitching these generals and colonels of like these big ideas, and they're just like, "Dude, what are you saying? Like, what are we doing and how are we doing it? Like, I don't want to." And I'm like, "No, but let me tell you about the why." And I'm trying to give them this. They're like, "Dude, you're like." And so I had to reposition it, and I had to start with military. You have to start with what we're doing, how we're going to get it done, and then why, and then who's going to be responsible for these things. So like you had to just pivot this stuff. And I think that's interesting with branding, especially with probably with advertising too, is like, if your marketing tactics is hitting those questions, the who, what, when, and how, you have to do them in very dynamic ways depending on who your audience is, because it
Yeah.
could be it's missed if it's not hit the right way.
It's funny you say that about branding and positioning, because we struggle with like a similar problem in a weird way, because we have to tell people that we're a technology company first, right? We don't want to be seen as media buyers, but we talk to media buyers who buy media. And that we actually have a rule where we don't use media buying in our vocabulary. In fact, this is probably the only time you'll ever hear it. And it's a real education process about how do you sell to people who see you as one thing, but you offer so much more, and you're trying to change the narrative to understand that you can do so much more with what's now available. Because if you look at what we do as a core competency, it's a technology company, and the things we can do with APIs and how we can catch and gather data, it's way more than media buying. It's a way bigger transaction. It's a way bigger set of principles and guiding light. But we are always in this position where it's like we talk to the people who are used to calling up Clear Channel and going, I want this thing. And a big thing of what we have to do is educate. And also, I understand that it's saying technology company is also a bit daunting, right? That can mean so much. And so what a lot of what we have to do and Bogdan has to do is educate the people who still do quote unquote media buying, but educate them on what this new technology is, which is kind of crazy when you're educating people in the world who spend the money, right, on what's now possible. So a big thing that we're trying to do in this new phase, once our new branding launches, is we're repositioning as a technology company first. And we have to figure out what's that micro narrative under the world of technology where people can understand how to use you, because technology is incredibly broad too. So it's like a really interesting thing that we deal with on like a day-to-day basis of like, how do you educate the establishment on what we are and what's possible? It's just an interesting place to be in.
First of all, tell them exactly what you're not off top. This is the pitch you probably hear 10 times a day. People are selling you on this. We're not that. Okay. We're a technology company. And here's what that means for you. We're going to free up all the shit you don't want to do to free up your time to do more of what matters most. Right. And that's why we started with technology. And here's what our technology does. It basically cuts out all the shit that you're tired of hearing from everybody else and all the guessing of this type of thing. Our technology does X, Y, Z, which means it frees up all of your time for the thing you hate doing the most to do the thing that matters most, right? And like blah, 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 right? And so I would just like off top hit with like what we are not, which is like everything you're going to hear from everyone else. We're not that. We're this. And like this is going to help you in the bottom line. And I would just do that like as a way to kind of hit them in the head with like, because they're going to really pay attention. Imagine a media buyer who's talking to 25 different billboard companies all day long and just measuring like, okay, and it's like a calculation that they're so bored, it's like bored to tears on, right?
It's funny because that's pretty often a situation where they're like somebody's doing an RFP, right? They want to book some billboards and they talk to all these companies, and there's some companies that say that do similar stuff, whatever. But usually everybody shows up with the spreadsheets and okay, here's your 4 weeks or 8 weeks campaign and whatever. And then we show up like we don't have a spreadsheet. And everybody's like, we need a spreadsheet. It's a platform. Pick the hours that you want, the screens that you want, and go live. That's it. That's how it works. And I was curious from your point of view, what's the common mistakes that you see marketers make?
Well, I think, it's changing so fast. Again, like marketing is a formula, it's a system, right? And so a system has many parts that have to work together. And if you look at the components of those parts, some of them are changing so fast, right? And so I think a mistake that marketers make is that they get stuck in what worked yesterday. And we're in a world that's like exponentially changing every day. So like if you're stuck in this certainty of like, nope, marketing works this way, it's like, well, then you're already fucked because because trust me, there's a bunch of people that wake up every morning to change those things all the time. And if you're not keeping up with what's working, what's not, it is such an energy waste and a cost of doing the wrong thing that just doesn't work. It's like just riding your bike in the sand. It just doesn't make any sense. So a common mistake of marketers that I see is like you get these people who believe that they're sort of that they are like marketing geniuses because what they did yesterday worked, and they're going to continue to do the same thing over and over again and not change. And I think like you have to be adaptive. You have to realize that you're like working a system, and that system is forever evolving. So as a marketer, you should be completely curious and not certain about anything. It's changing all the time. Again, to what you guys are doing sounds like it's really important because it's like, hey, if you're a marketer or if you're a media buyer, like all the time looking at spreadsheets and price comparison is waste of time. Like to your point, pick a screen, pick a time, populate, and then you should be thinking about all the new changes from yesterday that's happening today. That's what you should be spending most of your time and being a strategist and not being a price shopper on like, you know, a spreadsheet. Like that's a waste of time. So I think what you're doing is kind of innovative and allowing them to be their best.
All right, rapid fire takeaways. You just have to give us one answer, Ryan. So from me, one channel that you would double down on today.
LinkedIn,
One metric that actually matters.
comments,
One growth myth you strongly disagree with.
that views equal influence,
One piece of advice for marketers listening.
work the system. Like it's a system, you know, it's not one thing.
Dude, thank you for coming in today. This was awesome.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
Again, I start Monday.
Let's do it.